And good afternoon. I'm Tracy Sinclair, and we're getting ready to head down to Juneau for the release, for the announcement of Governor Dunleavy's proposed 2025 fiscal year budget. They are just getting set up in the room. And from what we can understand, according to the governor's office, they are prioritizing public safety and education in this budget, and also affordability for Alaskans' families, housing, food, childcare, and energy. That's what they say that the focus of the budget is. We will be, of course, hearing from the governor here in just a few minutes as they are getting ready down in the room in Juneau. This is coming live from the Capitol. They also talk about the budget, the total budget being $13.9 billion, and this is going to create a budget deficit of $987 million. That is based on forecast of reduced oil prices and production. And they say some of that will be coming through a draw from the Constitutional Budget Reserve and the Statutory Budget Reserve. So we're going to hear from Governor Dunleavy here in just a few moments to discuss the future, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2025. And we will be listening in as soon as the governor appears. And the governor is walking in now.
Thanks for being here on the budget rollout for the this coming fiscal year. I'm going to hit a couple highlights and talk about some policy initiatives. And then we're going to have folks that will come up to the podium also and say a few words. We'll take some questions after that. And I think there's a post-briefing. Where is Grant? Yeah. There's a post briefing as well. So a couple things I want to hit on. If I can find my papers. So some highlights and some big, larger numbers. So the total budget is going to be $10.5 billion that's going to be presented. And again, I should start by saying this is the preliminary budget. The budget process, as you know, it began months ago in looking at our initiatives, our departments, where oil was, our expenditures, and our desires to help Alaska in a number of different areas. But that process begins now. The budget will be submitted. The budget's going to be online here shortly. And then we begin the discussions with the legislature. There's a period of time in February where it's called government. There's an opportunity there to amend the budget as well at that point. But at any part during this process, the budget can be amended at any times in the committee process, through the legislative process. And of course, then we know that at the end of the session, which it was scheduled for 90 days, but can go to 121 days without a special session call, there'll be changes in the budget. But again, we look forward to working with the legislature to craft any changes, to come up with a budget that works best for all of Alaska. So total budget's $10.5 billion. UGF state portion is a little over $4.9 billion. So there's a deficit. There's a deficit going to be about $1 billion between what we're bringing in revenue and what we're proposing on the spend. The draw for that billion would come out of the CBR as the proposal for $1 billion. We are putting into the budget a full PFD at $2.3 billion is the amount there. Again, the reason for that is it's in statute. I swear to uphold the Constitution, the statutes of the state of Alaska. We understand that the courts ruled years ago that the legislature may change that, so we look forward to that discussion. And given the fact that since 2020, the inflationary rate is probably close to 20% cumulative inflation over that time, it's taking a bite out of everybody's pocketbook. So we're hoping that we can keep the PFD as high as possible to help Alaskans afford groceries, afford fuel, et cetera. The budget we're rolling out right now has no increase in the BSA. I want to make that clear. That does not mean there won't be an increase in the BSA. It's just that in this budget rollout, there's not. There is millions of dollars proposed in education. And I want the public to understand that as a former educator, I understand that schools cost money, education costs money. There's no doubt about it. The question has always been whether we put money in a BSA, and that's the base student allocation, that's part of the formula for funding, or whether we put money into the education world in various forms and for various purposes. We introduced a bill last year, for example, that would put money in the pockets of classroom teachers. We came up with 3 tiers in that bill. One tier is rural Alaska, generally speaking, high turnover, and with some performance issues. And what we are advocating for is, if this is passed, it would be a 3-year research model to determine if compensation truly does make a difference in recruiting and retaining teachers. That's always been a problem in Alaska. It's more of a problem now nationwide because of the labor force issues, but we did submit a bill. We're going to ask the legislature to really give it a serious consideration. But again, what would happen in some of the districts and some of the tiers, a classroom teacher could take home at the end of the year, as part of this research model, $15,000 each. Some of our smaller school districts in less remote areas, teachers would be able to take home $10,000 in their pockets if this bill is passed. And in our urban areas, which has less turnover and less problems recruiting, $5,000. This bill is about $58 million, and it's much lower than what some are advocating for in an increase in the BSA. But again, just want to make sure that folks know that when this budget goes out, there is not an increase in the BSA. There's not a decrease, but there's not an increase. We expect that there will be conversations around that, and there's no doubt about it. Oil was at a certain price yesterday, and guess what? It's at a certain price today. We've talked about this. You can't predict what oil is going to be. I think last year I bet folks $1 million that the price of oil would change. Nobody took my bet because a lot of people in Alaska are smart. They don't want to do that. But I would say that we're going to talk here in a moment and give you what the projections are on oil in terms of the budget here in just a moment. So a couple of other things I want to emphasize before I turn this over to some folks is we're also going to have an initiative. We're working through the details right now on upgrading the transmission lines in the rail belt. As we know, we're one of only 2 states in the country that cannot wield in power from other states. We're isolated. Our transmission lines, in many cases on the rail belt, they're old, outdated, and what we want to do is be able to upgrade those lines so that we can put much more power on those lines in anticipation of new energy sources coming into Alaska. Some would term that renewable. There may be other energy sources as well. Biomass is part of the renewable concept. But regardless of whether it's renewable or based on gas or some other fuels, we need to upgrade those lines. And so we'll be coming out with a plan that will be a multi-year plan with some suggested funding on how to deal with that. We also hope that the Green Bank gets passed, some geothermal initiatives. We're working on an initiative on Cook Inlet gas. We believe there's a lot of gas still in Cook Inlet, and we just got to get it out of the ground and get it to get into the pipes. So really what we're going to be looking at this year is what we call the AAA, the Alaska Affordability Act. And that's going to encompass things like energy, which I just talked about. It's going to also touch upon housing, and I'll talk about that here in a moment, child care as well, and food security. And so when it comes to housing, some of you remember last year I was talking about how I want to make Alaska the most pro-life state in the country. Part of that is making it the most affordable place, or at least competitive with other states. We're on a demographic decline in America, just like China is now, just like Korea, Japan, many parts of Europe. So we're going to be in a competition for people as well. And when I came up in 1983, the demographics of Alaska, the age group was much younger than it is today. We've aged considerably during that time. We've got to make this an inviting place for people with families. We got to make this an inviting place for young folks to be able to afford. So to that extent, energy is part of that, trying to come up with stable, cheap energy, but also housing. And so working with the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, we're going to be looking at a $25 million program that's going to help with down payment assistance on mortgages. This will probably impact, we estimate, anywhere from 1,100 to 1,300 potential home mortgages. And we hope to find that this actually does incentivize folks to buy a house, come to Alaska, and we can then take a look at that to see if we want to extend that program into next year. We also have about another $26 million going into a variety of HFC programs, including professional housing, and that includes rural Alaska. We have to make sure that our our state workers are able to find housing in rural Alaska, troopers, those that work with our Department of Health and Family, et cetera. We got to make sure that there's a place out there for them to stay so that we can maintain operational integrity in all parts of the state, including rural Alaska. Childcare, we know that we have a task force. We know that this is a huge issue. And again, when we're looking at trying to entice young folks here and families, you got to look at the price of a house. You got to look at the price of energy. You also have to look at childcare, and this is a reality. And so the childcare task force will be getting those ideas wrapped up here and be able to present some concepts to the legislature in the future. It's not in the budget per se right now, but what we're looking at doing is also doing a tax credit program with a lot of our corporations to help pay for some of this child care because, of course, private businesses are impacted as well when it comes to child care. Want to touch upon education for a moment. I'm sure you have seen that Alaska was rated #1 in the nation in charter school performance, charter school scores. Using the NAEP scores, which are federal tests that are given to 4th and 8th grade students nationwide, Alaska's charter schools scored better than any other charter schools in any other states. The closest state that came to Alaska was 20 points behind, and that was Colorado. Now, some might find that very interesting or perplexing because we've talked for years about our overall performance across our schools need a lot of work, and they still do. But this study that was done by Harvard researchers, and we're going to learn more about this, we'll talk more about this when we start talking about education throughout the session, really shows that if you create the right environment, the right system, you can educate kids to an incredibly high level. Now, some will say, well, what about rural Alaska, where some of the performance is not the greatest? Part of that mix is a charter school in Bethel that's also doing really well. And part of that is a native charter school in Anchorage, and overall, the charter schools are doing really well. So when you hear this discussion that goes on, it really is about more money, and we need more money, obviously, to operate our schools. You're going to hear also the discussion about how does that impact performance? How do the structures of our schools impact performance? And so I think both are necessary conversations, but you really can't have one without the performance question. Our charter schools are proving to the world, quite honestly, I think some people were astonished, but proving to the world that with the right environment, our kids across the state can attain incredible performance. We're going to also put more money into our homeschool process. We have one of the most robust public homeschool processes in the entire nation. It's one of the fastest growing. There's a school in Matsu called Matsu Central that I think is over 2,000 kids, K-12. It's the largest school in the state. There's a reason for that. It gives parents freedom to educate their kids in a public school system. It's not a private school. This is a public school system to meet the needs of that family because everybody's issues are independent of oftentimes their neighbor. And then, of course, we're going to be putting money into the university. What I should have mentioned, there's no cuts in this budget. So there's either status quo, it's either a status quo situation, or there's going to be some more money put into the university, put into the budget. And at the university, we're looking at helping them becoming a high-quality research institute. So we've had those discussions, and we're going to also be helping them with some of their maintenance issues as well. Public safety is another issue that decides whether people want to come to the state of Alaska. We made this a priority before I even won election in my first term. We've done tremendous, I think we've made tremendous inroads on crime in Alaska. This past year, the murder rates were up, and the assault rates were up. But in terms of sexual assault, in terms of property crimes, in terms of most crimes overall, the downward trend continues. And we want to keep that going in that direction. We're going to put some more investments in public safety. For example, we're going to be helping the department get aircraft and boats to make sure that we can service all areas of Alaska regardless of the weather conditions or the runway conditions. We are, let's see what else we have here. A lot of detail. We've talked about energy. We hope our green bank gets passed. We're an all-in state. We're not just an oil and gas state, although oil and gas is what built the state we have today. and we'll continue to work with oil and gas industry. We still power or get a lot of energy from our coal resources as well, but at the same time, we shouldn't neglect the new technologies that can unleash new energy for Alaska, all over the state of Alaska. And so that's why we talked about the transmission lines. We're going to help with gas in Cook Inlet. And with regard to the LNG prospects, that prospect is still being discussed at high levels in boardrooms around the world. I came back from New York and Washington about a month and a half ago, had discussions with folks in some of the investment houses. There is still a desire to get a project going, and that discussion still is going on with some of our Asian allies and their corporations, as well as corporations here in America. It's obviously it's not an easy process to consummate. It's an expensive prospect, but our location, our gas resources, and the fact that we're America, the fact that we have all the permits for that project, and the fact that thanks to our federal delegation, the inflation-proofed loan guarantees really make this project stand out. So we continue to have those discussions. We hope to hear something shortly. I know I've said that before, but it's a complex project. But we do have a number of outfits gathering around that. And as we mentioned, we have geothermal resources that we're going to help with in terms of exploration and other types of renewable approaches as well. We talked about housing and the child care task force we mentioned, and the tax credit process that we're going to look at and have the legislature ponder as we introduce that bill. Food security, we're going to help with food pantries. We continue to work on the Nenana agricultural project to make sure that along with Delta, Kenny Lake, Point Mac, and other agricultural areas, produce the food that we need here in Alaska to make sure that we are independent. We're going to run a Food Freedom Act, which is going to strengthen our cottage food industry here in the state of Alaska as well. So I'm going to wind down here in a moment and share this podium with others that are going to say a few words as well. Certainly our fisheries is become an issue, and it's an issue that we're working on diligently. We're going to be working with groups across the state of Alaska. We started with a bycatch task force last year, but this is something that is foremost on the minds of many Alaskans, including us here in the administration. And so with that, at this point, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Commissioner Cockrell just to touch upon a few things on public safety. He'll then turn it over to Chief of Staff Gallagher in a moment. Commissioner Hedberg will come up after that. Commissioner Anderson will come up, and then we'll have Attorney General come up and speak. So, Commissioner Cockrell, where are you? You're behind me. That's good. You always got my back. Thank you.
It's always good to have a uniform behind you.
Let me take this out of your way. All right. Yeah.
Thank you. For the record, I'm James Cockrell. I'm the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Public Safety. Governor, I want to thank you for your continued support. Oh, I always got to do that one after the governor talks. Continued support of Department of Public Safety. Over the last 3 years since I've been Commissioner, we've made gains that we've never seen in the history of the department, as long as I've been there, and I've been there 30 years. This budget marks another year of significant investments in the governor's top priority, that is public safety, safety for all Alaskans. The investment made this year and over the last 5 years by Governor Dunleavy and the legislature have helped save lives, and I can personally say that, and ensured public safety across our great state. This budget includes 13 new positions, primarily mostly support positions for the department, and reflects about a 4% increase in the department's operating budget. We also have an ask for capital of approximately $22 million, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. I would like to draw your attention to a few important initiatives that this budget enables us to do. We will be adding 3 dedicated crimes against children investigators in the Yukon Delta, specifically stationed in Bethel. If you look at the number of crimes against children in that region in the state, it's the highest in the state. This is something that I personally wanted to do for several years, and now I think we have the the ability to do that. To put it in context, every week we have 3 more cases referred to our office. In the course of 3 years, we had over 400 cases that our troopers investigated. So it's time that we focus on our children out in the western regions of the state. And as sadly, and we say this every year, I say it in my committee hearings, Alaska Natives, especially those living in Western Alaska, face the highest rates of sexual abuse in our state. I would direct you guys to the Department of Public Safety's website, look at the 2022 felony sex offense report, and I think you'll get some gleaming information out of that. These 3 investigators will be devoted to investigating crimes where rural Alaska children have been victimized and ensure that perpetrators of these dreadful crimes are held accountable. You know, I travel all over the state. I just came back from the Dillingham region, and when you listen to the stories of how underserved law enforcement is in those regions of the state, we have to do better as a state. And that's been my goal as a commissioner, and I know it's the governor's goal, and we'll continue in that direction. And our budgets have reflected it for the last 3 years. The budget also adds funding for 10 additional village public safety officers to serve Alaska's most remote communities as first responders. We also will give approximately a 7% pay raise for our VPSOs. Currently, I think when just 3 or 4 years ago, we had under 40 VPSOs. We're right around 70. I looked at the recruitment roster yesterday, and we have 20. Our goal is to continue at a sustained rate that we can continue to grow the program. We've made huge gains in that, and I haven't been to a village yet that hasn't said they wanted a VPSO or an Alaska State Trooper there. They're certainly the lifeline of the village, and they're an important component to the Alaska State Troopers and how we provide law enforcement and other safeties in our rural villages. This budget also fully funds 4 missing and murdered Indigenous persons investigators, trooper investigators. Again, that's something the department started about 2 years ago. It's a priority of this department to continue to investigate cold cases and current cases of missing and Indigenous persons or women. We also are requesting $250,000 for a statewide outreach campaign on missing and murdered Indigenous persons. This actually was one of the recommendations of the governor's first initiative, and will help educate both urban and rural Alaskans in what they need to do if one of their loved ones go missing. It's something that we've been, again, focused as a department. I think this is a huge step forward in addressing that issue. In our capital budget, I'll talk a little bit about that. We are requesting a new large class vessel for Southeast Alaska, most likely be stationed here in Juneau, to respond to emergencies, search and rescues, disasters, and enforce hunting and fishing regulations. Again, one of the things that this department struggles with, and has since I've been with the department, is able to get to emergencies in a fairly quickly time. Sometimes it takes us 2 or 3 days to get to a homicide in some of our villages, and we have to do better. And so that's why we're asking for the patrol vessel in Southeast Alaska. Certainly, if we would have had that during the Wrangell slide, we would have had resources there immediately, or as long as it took for our vessel to get there, we could have housed, provided food and lodging for, and bring more first responders to the area. The department's also seeking funding to purchase a PC-12, which is a Pilatus aircraft for additional platform to get troopers to rural Alaska locations without costly charters, or the big issues is trying to get a charter in the middle of the night, because things always seem to happen. They don't happen on a sunny day. They always happen in the middle of the night when the wind's blowing. This aircraft will allow us to land at 90% of the Air Forces or airports in Alaska, and most of those are gravel strips. This is very exciting because we're going to station it in Fairbanks, so we'll have the King Air and Anchorage, which can only land at about 40% of the strips, and then this one will get us immediate response, plus it puts us on the other side of the Alaskan range. This budget is another positive step for DPS, and will continue to improve the service that we provide Alaskans. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you, and with that said, I'll kind of turn it over to the Chief of Staff, Tyson Gallagher. Thank you very much.
Here, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, my name is Tyson Gallagher. I'm Chief of Staff to Governor Mike Dunleavy. As the Governor mentioned, food security is a huge priority for our administration. We're doing a lot of work on that. You know, a big part of my role is making sure that the agencies are working the way they're supposed to in service of the people of Alaska. And I think you're all aware that we have a new food stamp application backlog. And so the Commissioner and I work daily on that, my staff as well. It's an issue that's very important to us, and I want to get fixed. The Commissioner is going to talk about some of the stuff that we're doing to fix it. I just wanted to give you some context on how we got here. And there's really kind of four big pieces that have brought us here. You know, number one, inflation. I think you're all aware of the impacts of inflation on society today, but that is driving more people to seek more food stamp applications. It's driving up our application process. The disruptions in the labor force have put pressure on our recruitment and retention of our staff. That's another challenging factor. We also have an old kind of outdated process that's very human-based, and it's subject to the impacts of weather events when folks can't get to work or applicants can't get into the office. It's subject to IT upgrades and modifications, and we're in the process of a big IT overhaul that should make a substantial improvement in that process. And then lastly, there are onerous federal process requirements associated with this. A big difference between the previous food stamp backlog and this one is in the prior one, the federal government granted us a waiver to waive the requirement of an interview for every application. This time around, we applied for that same waiver at the request of the federal government, and they denied that waiver. So that adds 12,000 interviews that we have to do as a part of this process. And so that's an added time to each application in their review and process. So I'm going to let the Commissioner talk about some of the stuff we're doing, but thank you for your time today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heidi Hedberg, and I am the Commissioner for the Department of Health. And I really appreciate the Chief sort of framing the causes that created this new backlog. What I want to do is spend some time and talk with you about what are the immediate solutions that we're focusing on. What are the next steps, and what is this long-term solution to prevent and avoid future backlogs? So immediately, I want to make sure that Alaskans have the benefits in a timely manner. And once we received that denial from Food Nutrition Services, I made the decision to temporarily waive the interview process. The interview process has we collect a lot of great information, but in order to process through these SNAP backlog applications quickly, I am pausing those interviews. In addition, we are accepting the client statements when we don't have the additional documentation to verify their financial information. Those two specific changes that are temporary and specific will really help with the expedited processing of these applications. In addition, working with our very dedicated team at the Division of Public Assistance, we collected the team together, supervisors, leadership that are trained in processing these applications. They came together, and there's about 154 state employees, including the field staff, that are now dedicated to processing these applications. Their goal is between 950 to 1,200 applications per week, and what they are estimating without any further disruptions is about 90 days to clear that backlog. I want to say that in the budget, it reflects an $8.8 million so that we can hire an additional 30 new eligibility technicians. But we realize today, we know that there are Alaskans that are waiting for their application to be processed. And so we're very thankful for the Department of Commerce that will be assisting and working with us. They have funding in the budget that will be going to food banks. So as the food banks are seeing an increase in clients showing up at their doors, we want to make sure that we are working with them and supporting their needs as well. And so that is reflected in the budget. So what are the next steps? Those are the immediate tasks that we have. Some of the next steps, During the last legislative session, there was funding appropriated to the Division of Public Assistance, specifically on IT. And that funding is starting to come to fruition. So later this month, the month of December, we are going to be launching the online SNAP application. It's very similar to completing a PFD application. By launching that online SNAP application, we'll be able to prompt to ensure that we're collecting all of the information so that our eligibility technicians have everything up front. We're also reducing the paperwork and the shuffling of paperwork, and so we're able to maximize our staffing time. So we're very excited about the launching of the SNAP online application later this month. The next up, in Q1 of 2024, we're going to be launching a self-service portal. And it's coming in two phases. The first phase is the ability for clients to upload documentation. Phase 2 this summer is for clients to be able to check their status of their application. That will decrease the call volume that we have in our virtual call contact center. This spring, we'll be launching online interim reporting so that clients can report changes to the status of their application and communicate any changes. And then late summer of 2024, we'll be launching e-notifications. Right now, all notifications are snail-mailed out. They get lost in the mail. This is an opt-in, and so clients that choose to opt in, they're able to receive updates via email. So those are the next steps over the next 8 months, and we're really thankful for the funding that we received during the last legislative session. As we see these new IT upgrades coming online, that is allowing us to make some policy changes so that we are really enhancing the customer experience and supporting staff in these process changes. And so we look forward to future policy changes. The long-term solution is our integrated eligibility enrollment system. And right now, as things are progressing and on track without any interruptions, that's estimated to launch at the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025. That's taking a lot of concurrent planning and a lot of implementation. We have a dedicated project management office that's focused on implementing these IT upgrades, and it's going well. Our goal continues to be a streamlined, efficient system that supports Alaskans in need and supports our staff. And that is the goal that we have been working on. And we are rapidly working through eliminating this SNAP backlog. But we also need to care for these IT system changes. As we make these IT upgrades, it's really going to create a more resilient system so that we can prevent these backlogs from happening in the future. Right now, we are just working against time. I really appreciate the support from the governor with the funding that's in this budget so that we can support the Division of Public Assistance. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Ryan Anderson.
That one's okay to me. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Anderson, the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. We have another big year for infrastructure, transportation infrastructure in Alaska with the governor's budget. The governor this year has really put a focus on all of Alaska, whether it's urban or rural, all modes, whether you're by land, by sea, by air, is like we like to talk about it. So I'm just going to give you a few highlights, and because we're addressing some challenges here too. One of the big ones this year is with polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAS. There's new technologies that have come out now with new products where there are PFAS-free foams that are just coming out. And so as a department and as a state, we're going to be taking advantage of this, and we're going to start transitioning at our Part 139 airports, these airports where, Alaska Airlines and these air carriers go into on a daily basis that serve our communities. The budget has $2.5 million to begin that transition, and so that'll be a big step forward, for improving that situation across the state with the PFAS. It includes transitioning 25 airports from the PFAS-containing foams to these new fluorine foams, they're called. and also training about 250 firefighters, and then also for some cleaning and decontaminating existing equipment. So we're very excited about that. Also on the Alaska Marine Highway System side of things, this budget continues to focus on operational and capital needs to keep that system improving and to keep focused on restoring the health and improving service. Right now, this budget the budget includes funding to actually run 7 ships and to keep that system working. Right now, we're not able to run that many because of the crewing. And so that's just one thing. The budget does have enough money to run and improve service. Right now, our restriction is just the amount of people we can find to work on the vessels. So we're hopeful. We are having some improvements with more staff coming online, and so it's getting better. But it's going to take some time. But this budget does fund all of those things. On the capital side, there's a lot of good news with the recent Ferry Transit Agency, the Rural Communities Ferry Grant Program. We were awarded $92.7 million for the Tustamina replacement vessel. And that's, again, more capital funding. That Tustamina, the ship that runs out from Homer and Soldovia and then goes out on the Aleutian chains, that's almost 60 years old now. And so this is the funds to replace that vessel. And this is in addition to the $238.9 million for vessel improvements that we received in 2022. So we continue to make good progress on the capital funding for the Marine Highway System. And we're also not only focused on the vessels, but we're also focused on the docks and the port infrastructure. We received this year, Alaska received over $71 million in 2023 grants from the Maritime Administration. And this is in addition to $112 million awarded in 2022. And these are places all over the state. A lot of these places are AMHS facilities, and some places are local governments as well receiving these grants. So a lot of great things happening out there in terms of improving the entire waterways system on the maritime side of things. The other piece on the aviation side, this budget also funds about $4.5 million for rural airports to enhance operational flexibility, meaning getting out there, making sure we're doing a really good job on the snow removal, the brush cutting, all those things, the lighting, the things that it takes to really run a rural airport system. And there are specifically, in addition, there's $626,000 for addressing rural airport lighting. We recognize a lot of our lighting systems are aging, and so it's time to start really focusing on those and getting those back up into shape here. Also, we have a robust aviation capital program. We'll have aviation capital projects in Dead Horse, Bethel, Buckland, Kokanock, Kodiak, Heidelberg, Takotna, building projects, terminal projects in Sitka and Ketchikan, and then we have another robust rural building program as well out there. So on the aviation side, we're excited. A lot of really good improvements to make sure we keep that system strong and robust. And then we also have on a program to really start looking at rural Alaska and the frontier roads, how we can start, really doing things cost effectively, providing access to Alaskans to areas that, normally aren't so easy to access. And this is a program that we're starting some projects, and we're going to start, really doing some good construction work. One of the projects is called the Copper River Highway Wood Canyon Bridges and Trails. This is $4 million approximately to look at the area and to build bridges from Chitna going south all the way on the old Copper River Highway, the Wood Canyon Trail they call it. This is access to the Chitna Sub-District Personal Use Fishery. And what we want to do is provide access, with trail and ATV type access with ideas like cable bridges, a good solid foundation for people that makes it safe but accessible to get out to those places where it's important for Alaskans to have that opportunity. So that's a big one for us as well. And then the last one, I just want to talk a little bit about winter road maintenance. With the record winter events we've been having and all the snowfall, this budget also includes approximately $900,000 for contracting snow response efforts. And what this does is really allows us to scale up when we get into these events that we need to get out there. People want us out there faster on some of the lower priority roads. And so we're proposing to have these funds available to hire contractors and be able to clear this snow a lot faster. So that's my report. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to the Attorney General.
Good afternoon. I am Treg Taylor. I'm the Attorney General. I'm grateful that this year's budget proposal includes an increase in two areas of the Department of Law activities. And the first one, I'm grateful that Governor's proposed budget includes an additional support for our statehood defense efforts. Leadership of the Department of Law, Fish and Game, DNR, and DC meet weekly and work very closely with the Governor's office on statehood defense. And one of the things these meetings do is to evaluate new threats to state sovereignty and Alaska's self-determination. Some of you may ask, why is statehood defense such a priority? Why are we emphasizing it so much? Why are we asking for additional budget for it? Here's the reality is we could sit back and allow the federal government, outside groups, and bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. to dictate how we live in Alaska and how we support our families. Or we can push back and fight for our sovereignty, to fight for our right of self-determination, our right to do the right and responsible thing for Alaskans. Governor Dunleavy firmly believes that Alaskans know what's best for Alaska. We Alaskans should control our own destiny and have the ability to responsibly develop and utilize our vast natural resources for the benefit of Alaskan families now and into the future. Alaska has always been assertive about its statehood rights, so you ask, well, what's changed? Well, what's changed is the number and magnitude of threats to that sovereignty from the federal government and outside groups. Those harmful efforts have more than doubled over the past several years. Unfortunately, the feds and outside groups see Alaska as one big national park. 3 years ago, the governor wisely proposed putting some money aside so we could stand up on behalf of Alaskans and fight back. To date, the legislature has appropriated $11.5 million in that effort, and we have spent over half of that. Our estimates show that just for the current litigation, and the litigation we're soon to see, our ultimate cost will be about a little over $15 million. So there's that gap. This $2 million addition in the budget and other budget items included for Fish and Game, DEC, and DNR will ensure we can continue to fight to secure our statehood promises. More specifically, these fights are to secure Alaska's statehood land entitlements for and Alaska Native Corporation and university entitlements. To unlock Alaska by securing the ownership of the submerged lands in our state that allow access to vast areas that don't have road access. Secure the ability of Alaskans to use public trails and roads, assure the right of Alaskans to responsibly develop Alaska's resource and create jobs and economic opportunity, and protect the state's right to manage its wildlife and fish on a sustained yield principle, prioritizing subsistence uses for all Alaskans. In addition, I am also pleased that the governor has included in the budget an additional attorney and investigator in our consumer protection efforts. We currently have 2 attorneys and 2 investigators in our consumer protection unit, but the small unit has benefited Alaskans in very big ways. And this year, consumer protection attained $2.5 million in civil penalties. $769,000 in restitution and debt forgiveness for Alaskans, nearly $100 million in settlements related to opioid epidemic that will continue to benefit Alaskans for decades, and direct payments to consumers totaling over $134,000 in addition to non-monetary relief such as replacement parts, replacement products, or services. The unit handled 371 formal complaints and is currently litigating 14 cases and investigating an additional 54 additional cases. Unfortunately, this unit is currently resource constrained, which means there's more work than the people to do the work. This budget changes that dynamic and will allow the Consumer Protection Unit to redouble its efforts in protecting Alaskans from scams and unscrupulous business practices. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it back over to the governor.
Thanks, folks. Grant?
We're going to start here in the room with Sean McGuire from ADN.
Hi, Governor. Sean McGuire with the Anchorage Daily News. You mentioned your budget has $1 billion deficit baked into it. Earlier this year, you floated the idea of introducing a 2% sales tax, which we haven't yet seen. Could you talk about your ideas about reducing that deficit and specifically on that sales tax?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we talked about a full fiscal plan. We worked with a lot of the legislature last year. I think there was momentum last year. You know, we're now in an election year. I don't know how much momentum is going to occur this year. We are open to having those conversations on how to address financing state government well into the future. So that's on the table. I want to say something, though, Sean, and I appreciate that. I'm going to do a little walk here for a moment because when you said that, I remembered a very important statement that Don Young made to me before he passed away. Don and I used to talk on the phone, not every day certainly, but every once in a while. And when the Attorney General is talking about our statehood defense, when I would talk with Don, he would use the statement you probably heard him say, and that was fight like hell. You got to fight like hell to maintain Alaska's presence on the national stage. You know, Ted Stevens as well said that the federal government was not honoring its commitments to Alaska to be able to develop its resources. So where am I going with this? If we were allowed to develop every play we have, every oil play we have, every gas play we have, every mining play we have, every timber play we have, our revenue would be double, triple what it is today. And so as long as the federal government and its acolytes, its NGOs and others who believe it makes more sense to stop wealth-producing projects in Alaska, and we don't really care if we send it overseas to where there's dictatorships and child labor and minorities being arrested. We don't care what it does to a forest in Borneo. We don't care if there's 2,000 orangutans a year being eliminated. You know, we're not going to cut a tree in the Tongass, and I don't know if you guys have looked out there lately, but there's a lot of trees. We're not going to develop a mining play. We're going to have a discussion, even deeper discussion, about who we're going to take that money off of in Alaska. You know, the process has begun to take the PFD. My prediction is that fine Alaskan institution is in trouble. We're going to do everything we can to maintain it. But if you didn't find the irony or the fascination that occurred here, when the Commissioner of Hess and the Chief of Staff was talking about SNAP food, and it's very important. I mean, there is no doubt about it. But more people are being pushed into those programs in which we're going to have to take money, hopefully not from the PFD, out of their pockets, to shift it over to pay them over here. That's an issue that we have to deal with. But you know, I've been told by people we have 55 actions against us by the federal government, our own federal government. They'll go to Iran, they'll go to Saudi Arabia, they're having conversations with Venezuela. It's okay to talk with those folks and ask them what the U.S. needs to do in order for them to produce more oil for the United States. But when it comes to Alaska, it's lawsuit after lawsuit. So, Sean, I would say to answer your question, and in the memory of Don Young and Ted Stevens, who believe the same thing, we got to continue to fight like hell when they're wrong and they're pushing against this. And we've got to figure out how we're going to create more wealth as opposed to taking it out of the pockets of Alaskans in this diminishing circle of who takes who from what so we could pay for the services that we need. And so that's a discussion that needs to happen. We started it last year, but anybody in Alaska, and I'll finish it up with this. Our motto is north to the future. But what's happened lately is we've left off the RTH. It's no to Alaska for a lot of people. No to the Tongass. No to Anwar. No to Donlin. No to Pebble. No to this. No to Gas. No to Willow. You add up the no's. You're never going to be able to take enough money from individual Alaskans to pay for this. And the federal government knew this when we were talking about becoming a state. That's the reason why we've collectivized our resources under our Constitution, because we had to do it. So if anybody thinks we're going to be paying for this stuff just because we like each other and there's just money laying around, it's not how it works. So I am really looking forward to these discussions on fiscal plan. But if it's going to be no to the future, our new model, we better get working on that fiscal plan now to figure out who we're going to take the money from, as opposed to creating new wealth from the enormous resources that we have here in the state of Alaska. Anyway, Sean, thanks for that question.
All right, next we'll go to Eric Stone with KTOO.
Yeah, my name is Eric Stone. I'm with actually with Alaska Public Media. I'm looking at the department's summary, and I'm seeing for education and early development, it's down 2% from 2019, down 9% from the current fiscal year. Can you sort of help square that with what you said about investing more?
Department or the funding that goes to the schools?
The Department of Education and Early
That's
Development.
different than the funding that goes to the schools. There's no reduction in the funding that goes to the schools. That's the vast majority of our billion-plus funding. Yeah.
Can you explain some of the cuts?
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Lacey Sanders, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. The decrease that's reflected on that piece of paper reflects the student count reduction that has occurred from the prior year. So it is not a cut in education. It is fully funding the foundation formula and pupil transportation programs. It's just reflecting a revised count by the school districts.
Yeah, and that's problematic. We are losing student population we have for some time, and this is one of the reasons why we're trying to make the state more affordable and get more young families up here.
All right, next we'll go to Becky Bohr with the Associated Press.
Hi, Governor. The deficit, $987 million reflected. Do you consider this budget either sustainable? Do you consider it responsible? And can you talk about how we get on a footing where we're not relying on savings?
Right. Yes, that's a great question. It's kind of the question that Sean had. We've got choices to make. We either reduce the budget, we take money from individuals and Alaskans or corporations through a tax, we continue to take money from the PFD and eventually eliminate that. Or as they say, as Ted and Don said, we got to fight like heck to be able to exert our resource development mandates that had us become a state and are in our Constitution. If we could develop a fraction of our forests and a fraction of our mining place and a fraction of our new and additional oil and gas, we're going to pay for this. If we can't do it, then we have to talk about reducing the size of government and taking money from more Alaskans. And the problem with that is going to be people are going to leave and go to a place that's cheaper to live. That's what's going to happen. So the state's going to shrink in population. So we'll have the same discussions as to what's happening with our schools, why aren't we building more playgrounds, where is the chitter and chatter and laughter of kids. It's not going to happen in a state that's shrinking. And we're shrinking not because we've run out of trees or gold or oil or gas. We're shrinking because decisions are being made that hurt Alaska. And if those decisions continue, we're in trouble. I would say this, Becky. In November 2024, if there's not a change of management in D.C., we're going to have to hit hard the discussion about whose money we're going to take. Because if that administration is still in play, you can see what's happening now. It's going to shut the entire state down. So we just have to be prepared for two types of conversations after November 2024. How much money, Becky, are we going to take from you and everybody else at this table and businesses? And do we invest in moving vans going south? Or do we develop the resources that we have to produce jobs, wealth, resources for the state of Alaska? It's really simple in that respect.
But it's not a Biden issue, is it? Like, this is a cyclical issue for Alaska. So I guess I just wonder how
55 actions against Alaska saying we can't, ANWR, that was a legal lease sale in a 2017 tax bill, and now they're saying we can't do anything with it?
But how sustainable is it to keep relying on savings?
Well, it's not sustainable. That's why we're saying we want to produce more wealth. We want to create more wealth. But if we can't create more wealth, you got to shrink the size of government or you got to tax people. And what happens then is you become uncompetitive in the United States for business, for people, and you end up maybe, which is what the plan is, you end up with a rump state that billionaires visit in helicopters in the summertime.
All right, next we'll go to Jordan Lewis with KINY.
Hello, Governor. So my question really stems from, and this is me looking at it kind of comparatively with how the budget was last year, where there's a lot of, push to increase funding for education, and then certain things get cut, line item kind of things like that. And so I'm looking at it, and I think it's interesting that you note that we still need to make that progress on sort of education across the board for the state, and then you highlight the charter schools when that can come off almost as though and sometimes it can be viewed as the charter schools being viewed as a better option than the public schools. And so my question is sort of, if we want to try and get the whole of the education system at that same level as the charter schools, what actions do we need to take, and how does this budget potentially help with that?
Well, first of all, those charter schools are public schools. They're not private schools. In Alaska, all your charters are public schools, so they are public schools. Your home schools, your public home schools are public schools. So they have public school teachers, public school expectations, public school expectations. I was president of the Mat-Su School Board, and when we were in the Mat-Su, we had about 3,000 or 4,000 kids that lived in the Mat-Su but were not going to our schools. We undertook a kind of a research piece to see why that was happening. Well, not every kid can be fit into a neighborhood school. We found that out. So we began to offer more choice in the Mat-Su. Middle college concept was born in the Mat-Su when I was there. Really ramping up our home schools, our charter school process. As a result of that, we got more kids and families that wanted to go to our schools. So what does that do? If you have kids and families that want to attend a particular school or a particular program, the chances are they're going to do better. And so what we're saying this year is, there are models of excellence. And in Alaska, we are the top of the United States in charter schools. I hope that's the headline somewhere at some time. Alaska's charter schools are #1. We're going to find out why and see if we can duplicate that for all kids. What we do know is that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is what? Yeah, it could be crazy. Okay. So we're going to it's going to be a very exciting session. A lot of interesting conversations on a whole host of things. And education is going to be at the forefront.
All right, next we have Jazz Garrett with KINY.
Hi, Governor. Jazz Garrett of KINY. I was wondering, do you think it could be beneficial to create an education task force similar to what you've done with the child care task force? And what do you hope to see from the child care task force report later on?
Well, I'll start with the child care task force. We're hoping to see ideas, and a multiple of ideas. Across the board that could address child care for different family situations. You may have families that have a senior at home that currently may want to watch kids not only in that family, but maybe a neighborhood family. We want to look at that as a potential approach. You may have senior centers where you have seniors that are fully capable of wanting to interact with kids during the day. You might have a combination senior center, child care center set up. There's a whole host of things that can be done, and that's what we're waiting for to get the report from the task force. Once that happens, we do see child care as a huge component to keeping people here, to having people migrate to Alaska, and to making it affordable. So child care is going to be another huge conversation. That's why we're bringing it up.
As a reminder to folks on the phone line, please mute your phone until you are called on to ask your question. Next, we'll go to Mark Sabatini.
Thank you. Governor, I'm looking at your 10-year plan, and a year ago it looked very bleak 10 years out, although you had proposed entering the carbon markets as a way to wipe out that gap. Well, I'm looking at your current plan that shows a nearly $11 billion gap for 10 years out, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I heard you say the word carbon once in your overview. What has happened with that? And if you've got an $11 billion gap 10 years from now, what else is part of that plan?
More resource production. We view carbon as a resource. The carbon bill that was passed, the regs are almost finalized now, and then what we can do is we can have a large discussion with carbon markets worldwide. We also have a carbon bill that we're going to hopefully get passed that has to do with sequestering carbon that could help with, for example, the LNG line. We're trying to do everything we possibly can to avert what you're looking at on that slide. That if things continue to go the way they are, we continue to spend at a certain rate, we don't produce any additional wealth, we don't come up with any new revenue resources, hopefully many of those being natural resources. If we don't do that, we're going to shrink. There's no doubt about it. We will shrink drastically in the state of Alaska. What I'm saying is it doesn't have to be the case. We're going to finish up our regs on carbon, and we're going to work that worldwide. We believe that we will receive revenue out of that. There's reports that are coming out of Guyana, for example. I think it was one of the large oil companies is looking at securing a $750 million carbon deal with them in the state, the sovereign of Guyana in South America. But we're working it all as quickly as we possibly can. So those regs are going to come online here pretty quick. The other carbon bill, I hope, gets passed pretty quick. I'd market dilithium crystals if we could find them in Alaska, okay? I think we have the resources to be able to cover that gap. If we aren't allowed to develop our resources, Alaska's in big trouble because the premise was we had to develop it in order to become a state. If we can't develop them, we're not allowed to develop them, we're in trouble. And that bleak prospect will occur if we cannot develop our resources.
Very quick follow. You said a year ago it could be $1 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think it can. I just mentioned that they're inking an agreement with Guyana at $750 million. We have much more opportunity with trees, our peat bogs, our basins on the slope and in Coquitlam. We have tremendously more opportunity than other places do.
All right, next we'll go to Shauna Crondale.
Shauna Crondale, Alaska Education Update. I'm curious about the homeschool charter school. Are there thoughts as to whether or not to get more homeschools and charter schools and how to do that, or try to get some of the practices of homeschools and charter schools into the brick and mortar schools? Both?
Yeah, both. We're going to deconstruct what the researchers think is at play here in Alaska in our charter schools and be able to share that with educators and the public. I think it's a combination of both, to be honest with you. There are family situations that lend themselves much better to a charter school or a homeschool. There could be health issues. There could be work issues. There could be a whole host of issues that really fit other opportunities other than just the neighborhood schools. But I do believe that once we find out exactly what's going on and we apply some of those practices or some of that environment, replicate the environment, I think it's going to benefit all of our kids. It's really exciting that we now have a North Star to follow because I don't think there's anybody in this room that thought that Alaska would be named #1 in terms of charter schools in the nation. And that's bona fide research. That's not somebody just saying it. It's the first research ever done to measure the outcomes of charter schools. A lot of research has been done to measure the inputs. This is the first one that's ever been done to do the outputs, and this is what we're after, outputs. We're #1. So to replicate it and to expand it.
Our next we have Claire Strimple with the Alaska Beacon.
Thanks. Hi, Governor. I also have an education question. I'm curious about why is the plan to put money directly to teachers rather than increasing the BSA this year?
They're the ones either signing a contract or not. They're the ones either deciding to leave or not. They're the ones making decisions whether to come here or not. And we've heard for decades, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. Where do we need more money? We need money in the classroom. That's where we need more money. We need teachers to be able to say, I want to go to Alaska. I want to come here and stay in Alaska. It's really a research piece to see if, in fact, that does get people and keep them here. If it does, then we've solved that issue in terms of a question. Is money and how much a real factor for classroom teachers to want to come here and stay here? That's what we want to try and find out. I'm just hoping that the teacher unions and others support the concept of trying to find that out. Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to the phones now, and we'll start with Iris Samuels with the ADN.
Hi, Governor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is about the permanent funds dividend. It sounded from your comments at the beginning that you're kind of waiting to see how the legislature responds to the fact that you included a full statutory dividend in your proposal. But I'm curious, in terms of the existing proposals from the legislature for creating a new dividend calculation, if there's a particular one that you support at this point, and if you could specifically please share your view on the 50-50 plan and then the 75-25 plan that advanced in the Senate last year.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a number of different ideas floating around out there. There's a number of different bills, and I think there'll be more bills this year, to be honest with you. Iris, I have to see, the devils are always in the details. What does a 50-50 look like? What does that mean? Does it ramp up to get closer to a 75 for the people of Alaska and a 25 for government? Is it a temporary 50-50? Is it the devils are in the details, but I know that those discussions are going to happen. We're going to be part of those discussions. We're going to do everything we can, though, that whatever the result of any of those discussions is, that the people of Alaska don't suffer in the end game. So I can't answer what that is, but I can answer that we're going to be engaged in those discussions.
All right, next we'll go to Jack Barnwell with the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Is there anyone with the Fairbanks News Miner who has a question for the governor? All right, we'll move on to Nat Hertz with the Northern Journal.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Two questions for the governor that are related on transmission. One is, I'm wondering, can you be a little more specific about what exactly you're going to propose when it comes to transmission? And then secondly, there's no money that I could see for matching. What does that mean?
Well, I think they're, you mean in the budget?
Yeah.
What's that?
Correct.
You want to go and do it? All right.
Okay. Nat, to answer your question about the second portion, or the second question that you had, the GRIP 3 project, the governor has asked the Commissioner of Revenue and the Curtis Thayer with the Alaska Energy Authority to work through developing a plan that will outline what the match requirements will be and the spend rate will be over several years. We just received word about this funding availability, and it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get a plan that's well developed and before everyone. And Governor, would you like to talk about the transmission?
Yeah, Nat, ask the question specifically on the transmission again.
Yeah, you just sort of talked generally that you're going to have legislation related to transmission, and I'm just wondering, what actually you're going to propose, like if there's a specific policy measure you're planning on.
We're going to do two things, Nat. We're going to propose a 5-year plan to upgrade the transmission lines in the rail belt, so that those lines are able to have the capacity to take on more energy, and hopefully these are lines that will be able to help us out for the next 25 to 50 years. The other thing we're looking at is the formation of a Transco, which would be an outfit that would actually manage the transmission lines, so that anybody and everybody could put energy on that line. So whether it's gas, whether it's coal up in Fairbanks, whether it's solar online, wind, you name it, that becomes the cheapest way to put energy online. So those two initiatives are going to be huge. The funding, and thanks, Lacey, for that. The funding, as you mentioned, we're working through, and all of these things will be out before government, way before government is the hope. The government amended portion of the budget in February, so that we can get these discussions going.
Thanks.
All right, next we'll go to Ian Stewart with Your Alaska Link.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right. So the Anchorage School District is facing a nearly $100 million deficit. I guess, what are your plans, or do you have any plans to make sure that these schools are okay and that another school district in the state doesn't face the same situation?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. Well, we're going to first of all, we're going to find out if that's really the case, if that's truly what's happening. And then if it is, we're going to find out why. And then we'll have the discussion with the legislature on how to address it. But the first step in that is the school districts are required to give us their fund balances in all of their funds. And that was part of the language that was passed last year. And we just received data, I think yesterday. It has to be, we have to go through it. We have to look at it. We have to see what the status is of those funds. You know, when you go to a bank and you want to build a house, you don't walk into the bank and say, hey, I need $1 million. Okay. The bank just doesn't give you $1 million. They ask you what's in your accounts, what's in your savings accounts, do you have a job, how much do you get paid, et cetera, et cetera. We have the same fiduciary responsibility to make sure that what is being said is actually what's happening, and if there's anything we can do to help to maybe understand budgeting a little bit better, or what these funds look like, or excuse me, these fund balances look like, we want to have those discussions first. Once we go through that process, we'll address the deficits. That's what we'll do.
All right, next we'll go to Sam Stockbridge with the Ketchikan Daily News.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Governor, I was just curious if you have any concerns about the legal viability of using the federal toll funds to match the federal allocation for the ferry replacement funds. Why not use state money for that purpose?
Because if we can use funds legally from other sources, it preserves our UGF to be able to be used for other things such as education and roads and public safety.
Next question. All right, next we'll go to Brian with KMXT.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So my question actually doesn't have to do with the budget as much as it does the leadership of Alaska Aerospace. I saw in the ADN article that and I was wondering why reject Sean Thomas for CEO and president after his unanimous approval from the board, and as well as ousting Robert McCoy, the board chair.
Yeah, we don't talk about personnel issues as a matter of practice, and we haven't since I came into this office, and we're going to continue with that practice. But thanks for the question.
All right, next we'll go to Jeff Landfield with the Alaska Landmine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is to follow up on your statement about developing our resources, which I think most of us agree with. But the 10-year plan shows we're out of savings in 2 years. You know, it took Willow 20 years to develop, which is federal land, but on state land, PICA has taken 10 years, and Conoco's currently blocking Santos from using the road. I know it's in litigation. The Mancho mine up there in Fairbanks, there's a bunch of people on the lake, Harding Lake, trying to stop that. I mean, how do we develop our resources in 2 years when it takes, in many cases, decades to develop projects on state land?
Yeah, that's
sorry. Do that in a lot of money in 2 years.
Yeah, that's a problem, Jeff, and that's a problem that we are facing now. We faced 5 years ago. We faced 10 years ago. I'm kind of leading the state now as governor, and we recognize that. We recognize that if you say no to every project there is, you're going to have a problem. We recognize that if we don't make this an affordable state, we're going to lose people. We're going to have a bigger problem. We recognize that. And I hope that urgency is what is discussed here in the legislature this year. How do we get to that point? How do we plug that gap? What are we going to do with the size of the government? And what programs can we do without? But in the end, how do we make sure that we can, in fact, develop these resources? If it's going to be so onerous that we can't, we got a big problem. And that is something that we have to solve this year in terms of a discussion. But I would say that every legislator and every person in the state of Alaska should be saying yes to as many projects as possible to be able to avert what the 10-year plan is telling us may happen if we don't avert it.
All right, next we'll go to Steve Kirsch with KTUU. Steve or anyone with KTUU online?
Yeah, hello, Governor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to see where your administration stands on, say, incentivizing the renewable market, because I know you talked in the past about Cook Inlet reducing the royalty rates, making sure, the renewable sector feels like, hey, there's a playing field here for us to seek incentives.
Oh, playing field. We introduced a green bank bill a while back. We're hoping it gets passed this year. That'll be able to, from some estimates, turn $1 into $9 additional with private sector money as well as some grants. We are hopefully rewiring the rail belt and making it an open access transmission so that you're producing more solar in your backyard. You could put that back into the line for the utilities to be able to use or sell to others. And so we're also looking at geothermal, and we're also looking at wind. We're also looking at hydro. We had a energy conference the past 2 years that was world class. We're going to continue to do that to get investors here. So a lot of this stuff was never really started in earnest years ago. And it's understandable why. We had a lot of oil and gas, and the technologies weren't yet developed, but they are now. And we've got some cheap ways to produce electricity. We just got to make sure that we incentivize that, or at least don't stand in the way of it. And we got to make sure that we're able to transmit that energy to various parts of Alaska.
Our last question is from Yareth Rosen with the Alaska Beacon. Yareth, are you online?
Thanks for coming, guys. We have similar discussions every year, right? What's the budget? What's the deficit? What's the PFD? Education, so forth. Some great news. Charter schools, that's great news. That can't be denied, and I think we should be celebrating that. Public safety issues, we had a spike in murder rates. But generally speaking, it's going down. We want that to happen. We want to make Alaska more affordable. We need young people here. We need kids here. That's the idea of making this the most pro-life state in the country. But we are going to face a fiscal cliff if we don't do anything about it. I would love to see, I'm not going to pin my hopes on it, but I would love to see management in Washington say, unleash your potential in the state of Alaska. Stay within these guidelines so it's not slash and burn, but produce as much oil, produce as much gas, produce as much wind, produce as much geothermal, trees, gold, you name it. Put your people to work so we take them off the dole. Increase your permanent fund dividends so we don't have to shift those people to SNAP programs or food programs. Things that are kind of common sense. We have the ability to do this. We have more resources than just about anyone. We didn't run out of water. We didn't run out of land. We didn't run out of trees. What we've run out of is, I think, political common sense. If you don't develop it here, you got to develop it there. If you develop it there, you have no control over the environment. If you develop it here, you do. I think we have a real opportunity. Jeff's right. We're running out of time. I agree. I think those discussions need to happen. But if you've got legislators or if you've got people in Alaska that are saying no to this project or no to that project, you should ask them, if it's no to that project, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for education? How are you going to pay for these programs if you are saying no to that project? This is not the Wizard of Oz where we can click our heels and instead of going to Kansas in a balloon, we can produce a pot of money. It doesn't work that way. And the 10-year plan should be a stark reminder that we're going to be hit with the ugly stick of reality unless we get our act together. So with that, thank you, and I guess you're going to have a post. Where is he? You're going to have a post follow-up with these guys. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and New Year. Okay, see you guys.
And that was Governor Mike Dunleavy and several of his commissioners talking about the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. According to the governor, is a $10.5 billion budget. There is also, though, almost a $1 billion deficit in that budget based on forecasts for oil incomes. He said that would be proposed again coming out of the Congressional Constitutional Budget Reserve. He did say that he expects to pay a full PFD based on the statute. He says there are no cuts in the budget, but there is also no increase in the BSA. They have different ways that they are looking at actually paying some teachers in rural Alaska more to see if that is as a research project, to see if that keeps teachers longer. He's also wanting to get more families with children to Alaska and says they're working on some housing projects, including $25 million for helping people with down payments. They talked a lot about public safety. And one thing that Commissioner Cockrell talked about is 3 dedicated officers that will work crimes against children in Southwest Alaska. They will be based out of Bethel. We also heard that there was a food stamp backlog. Once again, different cause than the time before. They say they're working on getting rid of that. Commissioner Hedberg says that she has actually suspended the need for interviews, despite the fact that the federal government denied Alaska's waiver on doing interviews. And also they talked about the fact that they're hoping to get 7 ships running on the Marine Highway. And right now the only limitation to that is staffing, they say. So they're working on that. And Attorney General Treg Taylor talked about an increase in the money to defend statehood issues. So that's just some of what the governor and his commissioners talked about. Of course, we will have more tonight on Alaska's News Source, and you can find all the day's news on alaskasnewssource.com, and you'll find as well on our streaming platforms on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. Check us out there.